The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Elmwood Avenue, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the faded storefronts. Dust motored in lazy swirls from the tires of passing cars, and the air carried the faint tang of exhaust mixed with the distant sizzle of street food from a nearby vendor. It was one of those late afternoons in a forgotten corner of the city, where the hum of life felt both alive and weary, until a sharp cry pierced the monotony. There, huddled against the graffiti-scarred wall of an old diner, was a girl no older than 10. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her small frame shaking with sobs that echoed off the brick. Torn sneakers peeked from under her skirt, and faint bruises, marks of some recent unkindness, blossomed on her arms like shadows she couldn't hide. Passers-by glanced her way but hurried on, their faces etched with the indifference of daily survival. No one stopped. The street, alive with its own rhythm, seemed to swallow her cries whole. Then the low rumble shattered the scene. It started as a distant growl, building like thunder rolling in from the horizon, vibrating through the pavement and into the bones of everyone nearby. Heads turned as a lone motorcycle crested the hill, its chrome gleaming under the dying light. The rider was a figure carved from the road itself. Broad shoulders clad in weathered leather, a beard streaked with silver, framing a face lined by years of wind and regret. Ethan Hale. They would later whisper his name, but in that moment he was just the stranger who slowed his beast of a bike to a halt right in front of the girl. He killed the engine with a flick of his wrist, the sudden silence amplifying her whimpers. Dismounting with the ease of someone who'd logged 1,000 miles without pause, Ethan approached slowly, his boots crunching gravel. The girl flinched, eyes wide with fear, but he knelt at a respectful distance, his voice a gravelly murmur that cut through the tension like a steady anchor. "Hey, little one. Name's Ethan. You waiting for someone?" She shook her head, tears carving clean paths through the dirt on her cheeks. They took my brother, said he owed them. I tried to stop it, but..." Her words dissolved into fresh sobs. The weight of her confession hanging heavy. Whispers rippled from the gathering crowd, locals who knew the shadows that lurked in Elmwood's underbelly, the small-time enforcers who preyed on the vulnerable, demanding payments no family could afford. Ethan's jaw tightened, a flicker of something ancient crossing his eyes, memories of promises broken long ago, of a war that had left him hollow, drifting from one horizon to the next. He glanced at his bike, then back to her. "Sounds like trouble found you both, but trouble's got a way of meeting its match." With deliberate calm, he reached into the saddlebag strapped to his Harley, the leather creaking softly. Out came not a weapon, not a tool of force, but a violin case, scuffed and travelled, its latches worn from countless roads. The crowd murmured, confusion rippling like wind through dry grass. A violin, from a biker who looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands. Ethan opened the case, the wood of the instrument catching the golden light, its strings humming faintly, as if eager to speak. He rested it against his shoulder, the bow poised like an extension of his arm. "This ain't about fists," he said, his gaze locking on the girl's. "It's about remembering what's right. You hold on now." The first note sliced the air, a deep, resonant pull that vibrated through the street, drawing every eye. It was a melody old as the hills, woven from folk tunes he'd learned in the quiet nights after battles that scarred more than skin. The bow danced, notes rising and falling like the swell of an ocean, carrying sorrow and resolve in equal measure. The girl's sobs stuttered, her eyes widening as the music wrapped around her, a blanket against the chill of fear. Passers-by slowed, then stopped entirely. A vendor set down his tongs, an old man on a bench leaned forward, transfixed. The street fell into a hush, the violin's voice painting pictures in the mind, vast deserts under starlit skies, the roar of engines uniting brothers in arms, the quiet vow of a man to protect what mattered. Ethan's eyes closed briefly, lost in the flow, but his playing never wavered. It was no performance. It was a promise reborn, pulling from the depths of a life spent chasing redemption. The bruises on the girl's arms seemed less stark in the fading light, the shadows retreating, as if the music chased them away. By the time the final note lingered and faded, the entire block stood speechless. The girl wiped her eyes, a tentative smile breaking through. That was beautiful, like my grandma used to sing. Ethan packed the violin away, his expression softening. Music's got a way of calling folks home. Now tell me about your brother. Where'd they take him? She pointed toward the dim alley beyond the diner, where flickering neon hinted at hidden doors. The warehouse down there. They said if we don't pay, he'll never come back. Whispers turned to nods among the onlookers. Stories of lost jobs, empty pockets, and debts twisted into chains by those who wielded power without mercy. Ethan stood, his silhouette towering against the sunset. He wasn't alone anymore. The music had stirred something in the air, a silent pact forming among the strangers. "Then we go get him," he said simply, mounting his bike. The engine roared to life once more, but this time it wasn't solitary. A few locals, a mechanic with grease-stained hands, a nurse off-shift clutching her bag, stepped forward, their faces set with quiet determination. Word would spread, and by nightfall more would come. Ethan's old crew, scattered across the state, would hear the echo of that melody through the grapevine of the road. A promise from his past, one he'd buried under miles of asphalt, resurfaced now, to stand for the forgotten, to honor the bonds that time couldn't erode. As he revved the throttle, the girl climbed on behind him, her small hands gripping his jacket. The bike surged forward, leading the impromptu procession into the twilight. Elmwood Avenue, once indifferent, now pulsed with possibility. But deeper shadows loomed in that warehouse. Corruption woven into the fabric of the city, enforcers backed by badges that had lost their shine. Ethan's violin might have silenced the street, but the real song, the one of justice and reckoning, was just beginning. If this opening pulled you in like the first note of that violin, drop a comment below, where you're tuning in from, and what time it is there right now. These stories ride far, and we want to know when they reach you. The twilight deepened into a bruised purple over Elmwood, the kind of dusk that blurred the edges of buildings and turned streetlights into hazy beacons. Ethan's Harley led the way, its engine a steady thrum that cut through the cooling air like a heartbeat. The girl? Lila. She'd whispered her name during the ride, her voice barely audible over the wind, clung to his waist, her earlier tears dried by the rush of motion. Behind them, the small band of locals followed in mismatched vehicles, a rusty pickup rattling with tools, a sedan with the nurse's scrubs still draped over the passenger seat, and a couple on a scooter that strained to keep pace. The violin's melody lingered in their minds, an invisible thread pulling them forward, transforming strangers into something resembling allies. The warehouse loomed at the end of the alley, a hulking shadow of corrugated metal and chain-link fence, its windows boarded like blind eyes. Floodlights buzzed faintly from the roof, casting stark pools of yellow that danced with the flicker of moths. The air grew thicker here, laced with the metallic bite of rust and the faint, acrid whiff of oil drums stacked haphazardly against the walls. Ethan eased off the throttle, coming to a stop just outside the gate. The others pulled up behind, engines dying one by one into a tense silence broken only by the distant hum of the city. Lila slid off the bike, her small hand finding Ethan's sleeve. "They're in there. I saw them drag him, my brother Caleb. He's only 15 and he didn't do nothing wrong. Just tried to help Ma with the bills after Pa left." Her words trembled, painting a picture of a family frayed at the edges, caught in the grind of unpaid debts and false hopes. Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the perimeter. No guards visible yet, but the weight of watchful eyes pressed in from the darkness. This wasn't just some back-alley shakedown. Whispers from the street had hinted at deeper rot. Local officials turning blind eyes for a cut, enforcers who answered to badges as much as bosses. He dismounted, gesturing for the group to stay back. "Wait here. I'll see if words can open this door first." But before he could step forward, the gate rattled, chains clinking as two figures emerged from the gloom. They were built like walls, thick-necked men in ill-fitting jackets, faces hardened by years of intimidation. The taller one, with a scar tracing his jaw like a lightning bolt, smirked at the sight of Ethan. "Road rat and his charity case. Kids inside, paying up. Turn around, old man, before you regret the detour." Ethan's stance didn't shift, but his hand rested lightly on the saddlebag, the violin's case a silent sentinel. Memories flickered unbidden, a dusty barracks overseas where he'd made a vow to his squad under a relentless sun. "We look out for our own, no matter the miles or the years." That promise had crumbled with the losses that followed, leaving him to wander alone, the violin his only confessor. Now, it stirred again, fueled by Lila's wide-eyed trust. "Ain't here for trouble," he said evenly, his voice carrying the gravel of roads unpaved. "Just the boy. Whatever he owes, we'll square it fair. No need for chains." The scarred man laughed, a bark that echoed off the metal walls, but his partner shifted uneasily, eyes darting to the growing cluster of vehicles. Word travelled fast in Elmwood. The violin's song had already rippled through phone calls and texts, summoning echoes of Ethan's past. In the distance, the low growl of more engines approached. Harleys by the sound, their riders drawn from the fringes of the city like moths to that earlier flame. The enforcers exchanged glances, the smirk fading. "You think a tune changes the rules. Boys collateral till the boss says otherwise. And the boss don't negotiate with strays." Lila stepped forward then, her voice a fierce whisper that cut sharper than expected. "He's not a stray. He played for me like family does." The words hung in the air, simple yet piercing, stirring something in the nurse from the sedan, who clutched her bag tighter and murmured agreement. The scarred man advanced, hand twitching toward his belt. But Ethan raised a palm, calm as a still pond. "Music don't change rules, but it reminds folks of 'em. Honor, the kind that don't bend for pockets or power." He unlatched the saddlebag slowly, drawing out the violin once more. The wood gleamed under the floodlights, strings taut with unspoken stories. The enforcers froze as the bow met string, the first note spilling out, a lament, slow and winding, evoking the ache of broken homes and the pull of unspoken loyalties. It wasn't loud, but it filled the alley, wrapping around the tension like fog, rolling in from the river. The scarred man's face twisted, not in anger, but in something raw, recognition perhaps, of debts he'd ignored in his own life. His partner backed up a step, the chain in his hand slackening. From inside the warehouse a muffled shout echoed, then silence, as if the melody had seeped through the walls. By now, the reinforcements arrived, 5 bikers, leather-clad and weathered, pulling up in a thunderous line. They weren't Ethan's old crew exactly, but close enough. Wanderers who'd crossed paths on the endless highways, bound by the code of the road. One, a wiry man named Jacob with tattoos, mapping forgotten battles, nodded to Ethan from his mount. Heard the call. "What's the play?" Ethan didn't break his rhythm. The violin's voice rising in a crescendo of resolve, notes climbing like dawn breaking over mountains. The music wove their stories together, losses shared, promises etched in scar tissue, turning the standoff into a symphony of quiet defiance. The scarred enforcer's resolve cracked first. He glanced at the growing circle of faces, locals, riders, even a beat cop pausing at the alley's mouth, drawn by the improbable scene, and lowered his hand. "This ain't worth the heat," he muttered, signaling his partner. The gate creaked open. chains pooling on the ground like shed skin. Inside, under the dim glow of hanging bulbs, Caleb huddled in a corner, wrists bound, but eyes alight with confusion and hope. No signs of lasting harm marred him, just the pallor of fear and the faint tremor of relief as Lila rushed forward. Ethan's bow stilled, the final note fading into the night. He packed the violin away, his gaze meeting the enforcers. "Tell your boss debts get paid with truth, not fear. We'll see this square." The man nodded curtly, vanishing into the shadows, but the air hummed with unfinished business. As Caleb reunited with his sister, arms wrapping in a fierce hug, the group exhaled collectively. The nurse stepped in, checking him over with gentle hands, while Jacob and the others formed a loose perimeter, engines idling like watchful guardians. But as they turned back toward the street, a new shadow stirred, headlights piercing the dark from a side road, sleek and official, hinting at the corruption's deeper roots. Ethan's jaw set, the promise burning brighter. This ride was far from over. The violin song had awakened more than one night. It had forged a family from the fringes, ready to face whatever dawn brought. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The headlights sliced through the night like accusatory beams, growing brighter as they barreled down the narrow side road flanking the warehouse. Their glare washed over the group in harsh waves, illuminating faces etched with resolve and uncertainty. Ethan stood at the forefront, his Harley a steadfast shadow beside him. The saddlebag latched tight over the violin that had already woven its quiet magic twice this evening. Lila and Caleb huddled close to the nurse, whose name was Grace, whispered in the hurried introductions, their small forms dwarfed by the unfolding scene. The air thickened with the scent of cooling metal and distant rain, a storm brewing on the horizon that mirrored the tension coiling in Ethan's chest. The vehicle screeched to a halt just beyond the gate, its engine coughing into silence. Doors slammed with authoritative finality, and out stepped two figures in crisp uniforms, badges glinting under the floodlights like false stars. The lead officer, a man with a paunch, straining his shirt and eyes narrowed in practiced disdain, scanned the assembly with a sweep that took in the bikers, the locals, and the siblings. His partner, younger and fidgety, hung back, hand resting near his holster as if the weight of the night pressed too heavily on him. "What's this circus?" the older one barked, his voice carrying the oily timbre of someone used to unchallenged command. "Warehouse is off limits. Clear out or we'll make it official." Jacob edged his bike forward, the low rumble of its idling engine underscoring the standoff, but Ethan raised a hand, stilling him. Memories surged unbidden, the acrid smoke of far-off sands, the vow exchanged with brothers in arms under a merciless sky. We protect the line no matter who draws it. That line had blurred for Ethan over the years, eroded by grief and endless miles, but tonight it sharpened again, drawn in the dirt of Elmwood by a girl's tears and a boy's frightened gaze. "Evening, officer," he said, his tone even as weathered asphalt. "No circus here, just folks seen to a wrong. Boys free now, debts to be settled fair. No harm done." The officer's lip curled, stepping closer, his boots grinding gravel. "Wrongs? This is my beat, Drifter. Heard about your little serenade up the street. Fancy fiddle for a grease monkey, but pretty notes don't rewrite the books. That warehouse belongs to interests that pay their dues. To us." The admission hung like smoke, subtle yet damning, confirming the rot Lila had hinted at. Enforcers not just tolerated, but entwined with the shadows they claimed to dispel. The younger cop shifted, discomfort flickering across his face, but he said nothing, bound by the chain of command or fear. Caleb, emboldened by his sister's grip on his arm, spoke up, his voice cracking but steady. "They locked me in there for nothing. Ma's sick. We couldn't pay what they made up. "Please, sir, we just want to go home." Grace nodded, her nurse's instincts overriding caution as she added, "I've seen enough in the ER to know when fear's the real weapon. This boy's got no marks on him now, but leave this unchecked and it'll scar deeper." The words rippled through the group, stirring murmurs from the locals, a mechanic wiping oil from his hands, the scooter couple exchanging glances. The bikers, 5 strong now with more headlights winking in the distance, formed a loose arc, their presence a silent testament to roads travelled and loyalties forged in fire. The officer's eyes darted to the approaching lights, calculating. "Interests. You mean the ones lining your pockets while families like this one break?" Ethan's question landed soft but piercing, drawing a flinch from the younger cop. The older man recovered with a scoff, pulling a notepad from his pocket as if procedure could shield him. "Watch your tongue, or I'll run every one of you for priors. This is protection, keeping the peace." But the word twisted in the air, hollow as an empty promise, and Ethan felt the pull of his own buried oath, the one that had driven him from town to town, seeking absolution in solitude. Without a word, he unlatched the saddlebag once more, the creak of leather cutting the standoff like a breath held too long. The violin emerged, its curves catching the headlight's glow, strings vibrating faintly as if attuned to the night's pulse. The officers paused, bewilderment etching their features, the older one's smirk faltering into confusion. "What the hell is this? You think a toy's gonna—" The bow touched string, and the melody unfurled, not in fury but in a haunting cadence that evoked the quiet dignity of forgotten oaths. It was a tune from Ethan's youth, learned at his father's knee before the wars called, notes weaving through the ache of loss and the steel of unyielding honor. The music swelled, filling the alley with its resonant depth, chasing the metallic tang with something warmer, like wood smoke from a distant campfire. Lila's eyes widened, Caleb's shoulders easing as the sound wrapped around them, a shield against the encroaching doubt. The younger cop's hand fell from his holster, his gaze distant as if the violin dredged up his own submerged regrets. Nights questioning the badge's weight, the slow corrosion of ideals. Even the locals leaned in, the mechanic's tools forgotten in his grip, the scooter's engine ticking cool. Jacob and the bikers nodded subtly, their engines syncing in low harmony, a chorus of chrome and loyalty. The melody climbed, notes soaring like eagles over vast plains, carrying the essence of chosen kin. Brothers not by blood, but by the roads they rode together, the promises that outlasted storms. The older officer's facade cracked, his notepad crumpling in his fist. "Enough of this nonsense," he growled, but his voice lacked conviction, undercut by the violin's persistent call. From the warehouse shadows, the scarred enforcer re-emerged, watching warily, his earlier retreat now a full withdrawal as the music exposed the fragility of his employer's grip. More headlights joined the fray. 8 now, riders from Ethan's scattered network, drawn by urgent calls that echoed the violin's first street-side summons. They dismounted silently, forming a ring of quiet strength, faces weathered by their own tales of redemption. As the final notes lingered, fading into the night's hush, Ethan lowered the instrument, his eyes meeting the lead officer's. "Peace ain't kept with chains or payoffs. It's earned with truth, standing for the small ones when the system's blind." The younger cop stepped forward then, voice low. "He's right, Sarge. This ain't us." A beat of silence stretched, the air electric with possibility. The older man hesitated, then backed toward the car, muttering about reports and follow-ups, but the fire in his bluster had dimmed. Grace bundled Caleb and Lila into her sedan, promising a checkup and a hot meal, while Jacob clapped Ethan's shoulder. "That song of yours, it's calling the ghosts home." The group dispersed with nods and plans whispered in the dark. Watch the warehouse, pool resources for the family's debts, root out the ties binding badge to shadow. But as Ethan's bike roared to life, leading the convoy back toward Elmwood's heart, a radio crackled from the retreating patrol car, urgent chatter hinting at reinforcements. A boss, higher up the chain, unwilling to let this moral ripple spread. The road ahead twisted under starlit skies, the violin's echo a beacon in Ethan's mind. Promises reborn demanded more than one night's melody. They required a symphony of souls, united against the corruption that festered in silence. Dawn would bring new trials, but for now, the ride pulsed with the unbreakable rhythm of honor reclaimed. The convoy snaked through Elmwood's winding back streets, a procession of headlights cutting the velvet dark like threads of resolve. Ethan's Harley led, its engine a steady growl that resonated through the night, carrying the faint vibration of the violin's last notes still humming in his veins. Behind him, Jacob's bike flanked the sedan's taillights, where Grace drove Lila and Caleb, the sibling silhouettes small against the glow of the dashboard. The other riders, 8 now, their numbers swelling with each intersecting road, formed a protective wedge, leathers creaking in unison with the rhythm of tires on uneven pavement. The air rushed cool and crisp, laced with the earthy scent of impending rain and the metallic whisper of chain-link fences blurring past. But the peace was fragile, shattered by the sudden wail of sirens piercing the horizon. Red and blue lights erupted in the rearview mirror, multiplying like angry fireflies as multiple patrol cars surged from side alleys, boxing in the group's flanks. Ethan throttled down, signaling a pullover into a deserted lot beside an old rail yard, rusted tracks gleaming faintly under the moon, overgrown weeds whispering against the chain barriers. The engines cut one by one, leaving only the chirp of crickets and the crunch of boots on gravel. Grace's sedan idled at the edge, her face pale in the dash light as she gathered the kids close. Out of the lead car stepped the older officer from the warehouse, his uniform rumpled now, flanked by 4 more in tactical vests, hands hovering near radios and batons. Their faces were masks of enforced authority, but the lead's eyes burned with the cornered fury of a man whose secrets teetered on exposure. "End of the line, drifter," he snarled, voice amplified by the lot's echoing walls. "You and your roadshow just crossed into felony territory, interfering with official business. Hands where I can see 'em, all of you." His younger partner from earlier hung back, gaze averted, the internal fracture from the violin sway still raw. Jacob dismounted first, his wiry frame tense but measured, tattoos shifting like maps of old skirmishes under his sleeves. The other bikers followed, a wall of quiet solidarity, their boots forming a semicircle that shielded the sedan. Whispers rippled among them, names like Ryan and Nathan exchanged in low tones, veterans who'd found purpose in the club's loose code after wars that left them adrift. Ethan stayed astride his bike, one hand steady on the handlebar, the other drifting toward the saddlebag. The weight of his past pressed in, a foxhole promised to a fallen brother, etched in the sand of distant dunes. We don't leave one behind, not for kings or cowards. That vow had faded to echoes over the years, drowned in solitary rides, until Lila's cry reignited it like a spark on dry tinder. "No felonies here, just folks standing up," Ethan replied, his gravelly timbre cutting the tension without raising it. "You know that warehouse racket's poison. Families squeezed dry while badgers look away. Boys home now, but this don't end till the truth rides out." The officer's face twisted, stepping forward with a baton tapping his palm like a metronome of impatience. "Truth? You're a ghost with a fiddle, stirring up what ain't yours. Boss upstairs wants this quiet, and quiet means you scatter." The admission slipped out, heavier than intended, confirming the web, a higher chain of command, city hall whispers funding the enforcer's grip. Caleb peeked from the sedan's window, his voice muffled but defiant. "You can't just, we didn't hurt nobody." Lila squeezed his hand, her earlier fear hardening into the spark of shared strength. Grace cracked the door, her nurse's calm a steady anchor. As someone who's patched up the fallout from your quiet, I say enough. This corruption's bleeding the streets. Let it go, or it'll take you down too. Her words landed like rain on parched earth, stirring unease in the younger officers, one of whom muttered into his radio, voice laced with doubt. The standoff thickened, the air electric with the scent of ozone from the brewing storm. Ethan dismounted slowly, the creak of leather punctuating the hush as he unlatched the saddlebag. The violin case emerged, its worn surface a testament to roads scarred and promises kept. The officers tensed, batons rising, but confusion flickered. This grizzled biker, pulling music from chaos again. "Put that away," the lead growled, but his advance faltered as the bow kissed the strings. The melody bloomed, a somber aria drawn from Ethan's core, notes evoking the hush after artillery fire, the unbreakable thread of brotherhood amid ruin. It wasn't aggressive, it was a mirror, reflecting the officers' own buried honors, the ideals that had drawn them to the badge before the rot set in. The music swelled, weaving through the lot like mist off the tracks, carrying the essence of chosen family, riders who'd bandaged each other's wounds under starless skies, locals stepping from shadows to shield the vulnerable. Jacob's eyes met Ethan's, a nod, passing unspoken. This was their symphony, harmony forged in the fire of quiet acts. The younger officers lowered their hands first, the lead's baton drooping as the violin's voice climbed to a poignant peak, notes soaring like hope piercing storm clouds. From the sedan's depths, Lila hummed along faintly, the sound blending into the night, a child's innocence amplifying the call to redemption. Even the tactical vests seemed to sag, one officer wiping his brow, whispering, "Sarge, maybe we call it this. It's bigger than us." Radios crackled with hesitant reports, backup delayed, higher-ups second-guessing the escalation. As the final strains faded, lingering like dew on the weeds, Ethan packed the violin away, his gaze locking on the lead. Truth don't need force, it needs ears that listen. Walk away clean, or the song keeps playing till the whole chorus joins. The man hesitated. Thunder rumbling distant approval, then barked an order to stand down. The patrol cars peeled out, sirens muted, leaving the lot in resonant silence. But the radio chatter echoed faintly as they retreated. A captain's voice, sharp and unyielding, promising pursuit at dawn. The group exhaled, engines firing up in a chorus of relief. Grace pulled alongside Ethan, Caleb and Lila, waving from the back. "You're family now," she said simply, the words sealing the bond. As the convoy reformed, heading toward a safe haven, a roadside diner glowing like a beacon, Ethan felt the promise deepen. Corruption's roots ran deep, but so did the loyalties it awakened. The road curved into the storm's embrace, the violin's echo a guiding light, promising trials yet to come but unbreakable in their moral core. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button below. It helps these stories reach more ears in need of hope. Rain pattered against the diner's fogged windows like impatient fingers, turning the neon sign into a blurred halo that flickered against the storm-swept night. The convoy had pulled into the gravel lot of Mama's Roadhouse, a weathered outpost on the edge of Elmwood where truckers nursed coffees and locals sought solace in vinyl booths. The air inside carried the rich aroma of frying onions and strong brew, mingling with the damp earth scent, seeping through the door each time it swung open. Ethan killed his engine last, the Harley's growl fading into the downpour's steady drum, and dismounted with a nod to the group now numbering a dozen strong. Bikers, locals, and the siblings finding refuge in this unlikely haven. Grace ushered Lila and Caleb into a corner booth, her movements efficient as she draped jackets over their shoulders and ordered hot chocolates from the waitress, a sturdy woman named Sarah with laugh lines etched deep from years of serving the road-weary. The kids' faces, illuminated by the overhead lamp's warm glow, showed the toll of the night. Caleb's jaw set in quiet defiance. Lila's eyes still bright with the violin's lingering magic. Jacob slid into the seat across from them, his wiry frame leaning forward as he murmured reassurances, while Ryan and Nathan claimed stools at the counter, their leathers dripping puddles that the waitress mopped without complaint. The diner hummed with subdued chatter, the jukebox silent for once, as if the storm outside demanded respect. Ethan lingered by the door, shaking rain from his beard, his gaze sweeping the room like a sentinel scanning the horizon. The saddlebag hung heavy on his shoulder, the violin's presence a constant companion, its wood still warm from the Lot's serenade. Memories tugged at him. The foxhole vow, whispered amid the chaos of distant thunder that mirrored this night's fury. We hold the line for the ones who can't. That line had pulled him from isolation, drawing these souls together, but doubt flickered now, a shadow amid the resolve. The radio chatter from the retreating cops echoed in his mind, a captain's voice laced with venom, promising dawn's reckoning. This wasn't just about one family, it was a thread unraveling the city's underbelly, and pulling it risked everything. Sarah set down mugs steaming with cocoa, her eyes flicking to Ethan with a mix of curiosity and gratitude. Heard the rumble outside? Yours, I reckon. Kids look like they've seen ghosts. Caleb nodded, sipping carefully, his voice gaining strength. They tried to take us for Mars debts, but he played, and everything changed. The words rippled through the diner, heads turning, whispers weaving among the patrons, a trucker with calloused hands, a waitress wiping the counter, who'd caught fragments of the tale via hurried calls. Grace squeezed Lila's hand, her nurse's poise cracking slightly. It's more than that. Those officers, they're tied to the warehouse boss, skimming from folks like their ma. We square this, or it festers. Jacob leaned in, his tattoos catching the light like faded battle flags. Ethan's call went out wide. Old crews riding in from the counties, 20 more by sunrise if the roads hold. But even as he spoke, the door banged open, admitting a gust of wind and a figure drenched to the bone. The younger cop from the warehouse and Lot, uniform askew, face pale under the diner's glow. Conversations hushed, hands tensing on mugs and forks as he scanned the room and locked eyes on Ethan. Not here to bust, he said quickly, raising palms slick with rain. Name's Daniel. That music, it hit home. Sarge is radioing for backup, SWAT types, the boss's muscle. They're coming at first light to shut this down, pin it all on you as agitators. The revelation landed like lightning, the storm outside rumbling approval. Ethan gestured him to a stool, the creak of wood underscoring the shift. Daniel slumped, voice low. Joined the force to protect like my old man, but the captain, he's in deep, taking cuts from the enforcers. Tonight's the first time I saw clear. Ryan slid a coffee his way, the gesture simple yet binding, while Nathan watched the windows, ever vigilant. Lila's eyes widened, but Caleb placed a protective arm around her, the siblings' bond, a quiet anchor amid the brewing gale. Ethan absorbed it all, the weight settling like rain-soaked leather. His past surged, nights after the war, violin in hand under endless stars, composing dirges for lost brothers, vowing silently to mend what systems broke. Then we don't wait for light, he said, his gravelly tone steady as the diner's foundation. Truth rides now before they circle the wagons. Murmurs of agreement rose, the group coalescing. Plans sketched on napkins. Scout the captain's office, gather witness statements from warehouse victims, pool funds for the family's debts through a makeshift fund Sarah volunteered to hold. Daniel nodded, shedding his badge like old skin, committing to the moral fray. But tension coiled tighter as headlights pierced the Lot's downpour, not patrol but a lone truck pulling up hesitant. Out stepped a woman in a faded coat, face lined with worry, Ma, Lila, and Caleb's mother, guided by Grace's earlier call. She rushed to her children, enveloping them in a hug that smelled of home and hardship, tears mixing with rain. My babies, she whispered, then turned to Ethan, eyes searching. Heard you played for them, like an angel on two wheels. The diner exhaled, bonds forging in that embrace, chosen family expanding under the roof's shelter. Yet the storm whispered warnings, thunder rolling closer. Ethan slipped outside briefly, rain sheeting down his back as he unlatched the saddlebag. The violin emerged, strings glistening like veins of silver under the neon's bleed. He played softly into the gale, notes battling the wind, a melody of gathering strength, evoking the unbreakable weave of loyalties that weather any tempest. Inside, through the glass, faces turned, drawn by the sound. Daniel's resolve hardening, Jacob's fist clenching with purpose, Ma's hand finding graces in silent pact. The music bridged them, a promise reborn not in words, but in harmony, chasing shadows from weary hearts. As the bow stilled, Ethan returned, water pooling at his boots. Dawn's comin', but so are we. Ride together, or the rot wins. The group rose as one, engines firing in the lot like a symphony's overture, the diner fading behind as they pressed into the night. Corruption's grasp tightened, but the violin's echo pulsed stronger, a beacon for the trials awaiting under the breaking sky. Honor, once solitary, now rode with an unbreakable chorus, ready to face the heart of the storm. The storm broke fully as the convoy crested the rise overlooking downtown Elmwood, rain lashing the road in silver sheets that turned the asphalt into a gleaming mirror of the city's fractured lights. Ethan's Harley cut through the deluge, its headlight a defiant beam piercing the chaos. While the engines behind him thrummed in ragged harmony, Jacob's bike growling close, Ryan and Nathan flanking the sedans where Grace ferried Ma, Lila, and Caleb. Daniel rode shotgun in one, his discarded uniform traded for a borrowed jacket, the weight of his choice etched in the set of his jaw. Sarah had stayed behind at the diner, guarding the nascent fund of pooled dollars from sympathetic patrons, but her parting wave lingered like a promise sealed in steam and resolve. Lightning forked the sky, illuminating the squat brick building ahead, City Hall's annex, a nondescript hub where the captain's office hid amid stacks of files and forgotten ledgers. The air hummed with ozone and urgency, the scent of wet pavement mingling with the faint, oily tang of officialdom that seeped from the structure's vents. Ethan signaled a halt in the shadowed lot across the street, tires hissing to a stop on sodden gravel. The group dismounted under the relentless downpour, forming a loose circle beneath the overhang of a derelict awning, water streaming from leathers and hoods like tears from the heavens. "Captain's in there," Daniel said, voice raised over the gale, rain tracing rivulets down his face. "Boss of the whole rotten web, enforcers, payoffs, families crushed under his thumb. He's rallying his last stand, calling in favors to bury us as vandals." Ethan nodded, his silver-streaked beard dripping, eyes fixed on the building's lit windows, where silhouettes moved like ghosts in a machine. The violin called to him then, a pulse in the saddlebag, its strings attuned to the storm's fury and the vow that had carried him this far. The foxhole oath, reborn in every note, binding wanderers into warriors of quiet justice. "We don't storm it," he murmured, the words carrying to the circle like embers in the wind. "We sing it open, truth's the key that locks don't yield to." Murmurs rippled, Jacob's fist clenching, Grace's hand steady on Ma's shoulder, Caleb's defiant gaze meeting Lila's. The siblings, soaked but unbowed, represented the heart of it all, innocence demanding honor from a world grown cynical. They crossed the street as one, a procession of shadows under the pounding rain, boots splashing puddles that reflected the annex's stern facade. Daniel led them to a side entrance, his insider knowledge parting the way with a bypassed lock that clicked like a confession. Inside, the corridors echoed with their steps, the air stale and heavy with the must of bureaucracy. Faded posters of Community Watch curling at the edges, fluorescent buzz overhead, casting harsh pools on linoleum floors. Voices filtered from the captain's office at the end, barked orders into a phone, the scrape of chairs as loyalists gathered. The group paused at the threshold, tension coiling like the storm outside, but Ethan unlatched the saddlebag, the creak of leather a prelude to revelation. The door swung open under Jacob's push, revealing a room thick with cigar smoke and desperation. The captain, a burly figure with jowls sagging under a rumpled cap, froze mid-sentence, phone clattering to the desk. Flanking him were three enforcers, the scarred man from the warehouse among them, hands twitching toward drawers that hid more than paper. Four officers milled uneasily, badges dulled by the lamplight, their faces a mosaic of doubt and duty. "What the trespassers!" the captain bellowed, rising like a wave about to crash, but his bluster faltered at the sight of Ethan drawing the violin, bow poised against the strings. Rain drummed the roof above, a celestial drumbeat underscoring the standoff. The first note pierced the haze, deep and resonant, vibrating through the room like a tremor in the foundation. It was a finale composed in Ethan's soul, a symphony of redemption, notes weaving the threads of broken promises into a tapestry of unyielding light. The melody swelled, evoking the roar of engines uniting lost souls, the hush of families mended under starlit vows, the quiet power of standing firm when authority crumbled to greed. Lila and Caleb stepped forward, their small voices joining in a hummed refrain from the diner's cocoa-warmed memory, amplifying the call. Grace's eyes shone, Ma's hand clasping hers, while Jacob, Ryan, and Nathan formed a steadfast line, their presence a chorus of chrome-hardened loyalty, the captain's face drained of color, the violin's voice stripping away his armor note by note, exposing the years of skimmed funds, the families like Ma's he'd condemned to shadows for a cut of the pie. The scarred enforcer backed against the wall, recognition dawning of his own eroded code, while the officers shifted one by one, holsters unclipped not in threat, but surrender. Daniel spoke then, voice steady amid the music's swell. "It's over, Cap, the web's tearing. Witnesses from the streets, funds traced, your calls recorded. This song, it's the truth you forgot." The melody peaked, soaring like dawn, breaking through clouds, carrying the essence of chosen family, bonds forged not in blood or badge, but in the courage to honor what mattered. As the final strains lingered, fading into the rain's hush, the captain slumped into his chair, hands trembling over a drawer that yielded not weapons, but ledgers, pages of illicit tallies spilling like confessions. How did it come to this?" he whispered, the fight leaching from him like ink in water. Ethan lowered the violin, packing it with deliberate care, his gaze meeting the man's. "Promises survive if you let 'em. You chose shadows. We chose the light. Square it now. Clear the debts, face the reckoning, or the chorus grows." The room exhaled, enforcers slinking out into the storm, officers nodding grim agreements to internal affairs calls already buzzing on their radios. Dawn crept in as the group emerged, the rain easing to a mist that gilded the streets in soft gold. Ma enveloped Lila and Caleb in her arms, the family whole under the annex's eaves, while Grace coordinated aid from the hospital network, debts dissolving in the wake of exposed truth. Jacob clapped Ethan's back, Ryan and Nathan revving engines in salute, Daniel pocketing a whistleblower's resolve. The violin, silent now, rested secure, a relic of nights that birthed justice from melody, redemption from the road. Elmwood stirred awake, its pulse steadier, shadows retreating before the unbreakable rhythm of honor reclaimed. Ethan mounted his Harley, the horizon calling once more, but this time with echoes of family trailing in his wake. Promises, kept, wove legacies that outlasted storms, proving that one man's song could silence a city's silence. Thank you for riding this journey with us to the end. These tales of quiet courage are fueled by hearts like yours. If Ethan's melody moved you, subscribe for more stories that honor the promises we keep. Drop a comment below. What spoke to you most in this ride? Your words keep the chorus alive.